Today's lesson is the introduction to the periodic table. We're going to talk just a little bit about elements. The bell ringer is on my website, and there are 4 objectives that I'd like you to pull from this lesson, even though it's really short. The first thing I'd like you to be able to do is describe a pure substance. That should be a review from earlier on in this book. Second, I'd like you to try to describe the characteristics of elements, giving examples of what some of those characteristics might be. Then explain how elements can be identified and classify elements according to 3 select properties. So an element is a substance that can't be separated or broken down into anything more simple by chemical means. In other words, an element is a pure substance. Thinking back to what we talked about in chapter 1, a pure substance is a sample of matter that's going to be either a single element or a single compound. So while water, H2O, might be considered a pure substance because it's a single compound, an element is even more purified than that. It's a single substance, not any 2 things joined together. A pure substance will always have definite chemical and physical properties. So an element has definite, always the same chemical and physical properties. And elements contain only one type of particle. So an atom would be one type of particle. Atoms are so small that we're not able to see them. This is part of the reason why our scientific understanding of elements in the periodic table didn't really come about until the last few centuries. Like we said before, pure substances have definite characteristic properties. Those characteristic properties can be physical. Examples of physical characteristics would be boiling point, melting point, and density. They can also be chemical properties that are characteristic. So a reactivity with acid, like calcite, calcium reacts with acid. It can be flammability. Something like, the ability of that substance to burn when exposed to heat. Some elements may share characteristic properties in common, but there will always be at least one property that allows you to tell elements apart. Sort of like twins, right? There might be a lot of things that twins have in common in some instances, but there'll be at least one way that you can tell those 2 individuals apart. Characteristic properties, recall, do not depend on the amount of an element present. In other words, a characteristic property like the boiling point of water is going to exist if we have just one water molecule, just as much as it would exist if we had a whole pan full. Elements, remember, are classified by their properties. There are 3 major categories of elements that we're going to be exploring more in the next few days as we talk through the periodic table. Those categories are metals, nonmetals, and metalloids. A metal is an element that's shiny and that can conduct heat and electricity well. You'll notice that metals are all located in a very similar spot on the periodic table. Nonmetals are elements that conduct heat and electricity poorly. So they are like the anti-metals. They have strengths where the metals have weaknesses and weaknesses where the metals have strength. Nonmetals are great insulators, which sometimes is a characteristic property that we want to be able to take advantage of. Metalloids sort of fall in the middle. They're not too hot, not too cold. Metalloids are elements that have properties of both metals and nonmetals at different times. I'm going to put this video on my website next to the lesson recording so you can watch it. It's short, it's about 2.5 minutes long, and it goes into just a little bit more depth explaining what is an element. And that is it. Remember that an element is a substance in which all of the particles are alike. They're pure substances. Elements can't be broken down into anything simpler by physical or chemical means, and they have unique sets of both physical and chemical properties. They have characteristic properties. Elements are going to be classified into one of 3 major categories. They're classified this way on the periodic table too. Those would be metals, nonmetals, and metalloids. Remember that metals, nonmetals, and metalloids are set apart because of their properties. The homework for Wednesday is the elements homework assignment. You'll find that on my website. Let me know if you need any help.